G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to DCS World with Mags. And welcome aboard the UH-1H Iroquois, otherwise known affectionately as the Huey. Now the Huey is absolutely one of my favourite modules in DCS. I have the greatest time flying this thing around. It is a wonderfully designed aircraft by Bell a wonderful representation of the actual proper aircraft. A couple of interesting things about it, but first we'll go through a little bit of a history on the Iroquois, or the Huey. The Huey entered service in 1960 and it was the first turbine-powered helicopter to enter production for the United States military. There are over 16,000 Hueys built and they served in countries all around the world, ranging from the US Army, the Australian Army, the Japanese Self-Defense Force. Multiple countries through Europe and Asia also use the Huey. Now, part of the reason why it was such a popular aircraft worldwide was the ruggedness of the design and the reliability. Originally, when the Bell Corporation was tasked with building this helicopter, the plans for the machine, the US Army wanted an emergency medical evacuation helicopter. Other helicopters or rotary wing aircraft that were available at the time were generally underpowered or too large, bulky and slow. They wanted something that was powerful, but small and nippy, able to get around with a high level of agility. The other specification for the helicopter was it had to be very cheap to manufacture and maintain. They were effectively designed as a throwaway aircraft. Maintenance and reliability was of course incredibly important, but they wanted the option that if the aircraft was too severely damaged or too far gone in its components, that they could easily dispose of the aircraft and simply replace it with a new one. Bell Helicopter took these design specifications and wound up building a machine that surpassed them on a level that nobody at the time was expecting. The Huey was small in comparison to its excellent turbine power plant. This gave it a phenomenal power-to-weight ratio for its time. In fact, the distinctive thud noise that you get out of a Huey's rotors when they're in flight is actually the tips of the rotor blades going supersonic. The airframe itself went a level beyond durability, with pilots during the Vietnam War often reported as saying that structural damage to a Huey was irrelevant. If the rotors were still attached to the engine and the controls were still attached to the rotors, the Huey will fly regardless of anything else. Of course, by the Vietnam War, the aircraft had transferred into the hands of the US Marine Corps, who of course made even more modifications to the Huey, including a full aluminium construction, which not only increased the resistance of the airframe to things like corrosion, but also lightened the overall weight of the aircraft, along with upgrading the engine to an even more powerful turbine than what the Army version of the Huey actually had. Now, the version of the Huey that we see simulated by Bell is the UH-1H. This is the premier model of the Huey. This is the model that made the Huey famous. Of the over 16,000 UH-1 models that were actually produced, the UH-1H represents almost 5,500 of them. An aircraft designed so well that it's still in service with some militaries today. Now, as I said earlier, Bell representation of the Huey is incredibly accurate. It has a fully interactive cockpit, although you will not see a lot of that in this video, and that is because I've bound all of the Huey's controls to my Hodder system, so I don't actually have to interact with any of the components inside of the helicopter while flying, at least not during general flight. All the crew positions are modelled and have AI controlling each and every point of the aircraft. There's also a switchover, so if your pilot happens to get killed during a mission, you will take over the co-pilot's position and be able to continue flying the helicopter to complete the mission. Now, of course, there are some sacrifices that had to be made, as this is a multi-crewed aircraft. For example, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a small panel that says crew status. This is a throwback to the fact that these helicopters are usually operated by multiple people, as in fact at the moment we have two gunners sitting in the back and we have the co-pilot. Traditionally, the co-pilot would do things automatically on voice commands and there would be interaction between the crew, but as this is AI, that is not something that we can actually do. The panel is a representation of what that interaction would be. As you can see, all the crew members on board your helicopter, what their current status is, you can see what their fire settings are, so you know whether or not they're set to engage hostile targets or on hold, how much ammunition they have.
Check out those hinds. They always thought they looked like dragons. Scary bastards.
Yeah, we'll look at the hinds in a second. And you can also see exactly what their burst settings are, so whether or not they're set to short or long bursts on their machine guns and their armament. Speaking of armament, at the start of this video you would have seen a little panel sitting above the crew status that showed an armament display. This is again a throwback from being a multi-crewed aircraft. The actual armament control panel is modelled and is fully working within the aircraft, but it sits back in the center console, as far back as it can go, almost slightly behind where the pilot sits. In a combat environment, it's extremely awkward as a pilot to look back on that to see what your weapon settings are and to manipulate them. And in real life, in the combat scenario, the co-pilot would actually do that on the commands of the pilot. As that's not a possibility for DCS's AI, there is an armament panel that you can bring up at will that represents this crew interaction. The physical model for the aircraft, as you can see, is amazingly detailed. You'll actually notice that the aircraft seems to be wallowing a little bit at the moment, and that's because I'm flying overweight, but we'll talk about that in the mission in a moment. The damage modelling for the Huey is amazingly accurate. The armament options are fully customisable and completely accurate to what the aircraft carried. And flight model wise, this is one of the best represented helicopters that you will ever fly in a simulator anywhere. Everything, every aerodynamic effect that can affect a helicopter, everything from vortex ring state, drift, sway, everything is modelled in pristine detail. I have never seen a helicopter module as well modelled as this one, in any simulator I've ever had the privilege of flying. So that's enough of me fangirling over the Huey and the quality of the Huey module. As you can tell, I really do love this one. So what the hell are we doing out here, and what are two Hueys doing flying in formation with two Hinds? Reconnaissance has located a large rebel encampment just 5 kilometers northwest of Shakir. HQ is tasked to combat sortie to destroy the base. Although officially a Georgian military operation, our forces are providing direct airborne assistance. Uzi Flight, 2 Georgian Air Force Mi-24 Hinds, will lead the assault on the encampment, targeting AAA defences and hardened structures. Forward Flight, 2 UH-1H helicopters in gunship configuration, will then enter the area, engaging soft targets and rebel personnel. Or to put it another way, the Hinds are going to go into this rebel stronghold, they're going to unload everything they have, and then we're going to go in and mop up what's left. Now this particular mission is not actually a download. This particular mission comes standard with the Huey. It's one of 3 missions that come independent of the campaign. The Huey module itself actually features a full-fledged, I think it's a 35 mission campaign, and along with that it comes with 3 individual missions that are extremely well detailed. One mission focuses on the extraction of a pilot from behind enemy lines. One is a large-scale rescue after an air crash in harsh environmental conditions, and the third one is the rebel base assault, which we're flying now. Now I mentioned before that I'm flying the Huey a little bit overweight and it's affecting handling. The weapons loadout I've chosen for this particular mission is actually above the recommended payload weight for the Huey for combat operations. The weapons loadout for this particular mission is 2 7.62mm M134 miniguns mounted on flexible mounts controlled by the co-pilot to the front of the aircraft, 2 rocket pods consisting of 24 unguided high explosive rockets, and 2 additional M134 miniguns mounted in the left and right hand side gunner positions. Now the M134 minigun has a variable fire rate setting that can switch between 2,000 rounds per minute and 6,000 rounds per minute. This means on maximum fire rate settings, the Huey in this configuration is capable of putting a whopping 24,000 rounds per minute on target. Now of course that would be ludicrous. The gunners on this aircraft are set to 2,000 rounds per minute, and I'll only be using the rocket systems if I absolutely need to. Now as you can hear over the radio, the Hinds have begun their attack. The rebel base is just in that valley ahead. I'm waiting for them to begin their initial assault and clear out, and then I intend to go in. I'm going to orbit the combat area at about 500 to 800 feet, and I'm going to let my right-hand door gunner and my co-pilot operating the flexible minigun on the right-hand side of the helicopter hose down the area. Now as they begin to run out of ammunition, I'll reverse the orbit and bring my left-hand side gunner and the left-hand side minigun on flexible mount into play and continue the orbit. This should keep the helicopter at an altitude where it should be mostly invulnerable to small arms fire and give me safe room to drop countermeasures should they have any anti-air guided missiles, while still staying close enough to allow accurate and devastating fire from my gunners clear out the soft targets in the area. So I'm beginning my descent down to 800 feet, heading up the mouth of the valley. Now I'm straying to the left-hand side of the valley as the base wraps around behind the hill to the right, and I want to give myself enough room to begin a wide right orbit. Now it's at this point that I activate the AI gunners. Now my first step is actually to only set them to return fire mode, not at free fire. The gunners have a habit of trying to engage targets at beyond effective ranges if you let them. Setting them to return fire will have them kick open the doors of the helicopter and take up their weapons in fire position, but will force them to not fire until you get within at least a kilometer's range of your targets. Anything outside of that, and the M134 minigun is not effective, so you would just be wasting ammunition. still descending, and I'm happy to range the first targets, or at least the tents that the first targets are based around. I don't actually have visual on any of them yet, so switch the guns over to fire at will. Unfortunately, at this angle of the first pass, I don't really have a great view on exactly what's going on, although you should be able to still see the tracer rounds from the M134s ricocheting off the ground at the points the gunners are engaging. Just dropping the speed on the Huey a little bit at the moment and pulling it back. I want to give my gunners more time on target from this angle. You can see the sheer volume of fire that a gunship can actually put down. And then remember, this is only 2 of its guns. The other 2 at the moment are sitting at idle. I had a small moment of panic there. I thought that maybe the Hinds had missed one of the AAA emplacements, but it turns out I was just getting close enough that small arms fire was finally starting to reach the Huey. Now at this point it looks like the north side of the camp has been cleared out and my right hand side guns are just about empty. So bring the chopper around hard right and let the left gun shift into position. Now as we're heading along the south side of the camp, the second Huey decides to get involved here and he opens up with the rockets. I'm not entirely sure exactly how many targets are left at this point, so I'm just going to swing around wide so I can turn the Huey nice and clear and fly almost straight through the centre of the camp, just to see if there's anything else in there that I need to flush out. I'm going to fly pretty low on this pass. I want to get a good eye on what's going on. Oh, and if anybody's wondering exactly how much ammunition a Huey carries in this configuration, I have absolutely no idea, but you'll notice every time I look behind me, there's a whole series of boxes that take up the entire crew compartment in the Huey. That is all ammunition. That is one gigantic ammunition belt that feeds all 4 of these guns. Now I dropped the pilot sight down here because I was going to do a rocket run on this section of the base, but that yeehaw signified the last kill in the area. The rebel base has been cleaned out. All that was left to do at this point is turn the Huey around, head back towards the valley mouth, exit out across the town over to the river and follow the river all the way back to the airbase. The mission completes upon landing. The challenge of performing a mission like this in the Huey isn't so much the gunnery skills. As you saw, you don't really need to man any of the guns yourself. It's controlling the Huey and keeping all of your gunners on target in a confined space, keeping enough altitude to keep out of the way of small arms fire that can potentially destroy your helicopter, while at exactly the same time staying low enough to make sure that your gunners always have the maximum amount of time that they need on target in order to complete the mission. Basically, the pilot should be doing the flying while the gunners are doing the fighting, although I do have to admit I was a little disappointed that everything died before I could complete my rocket run. Anyways, ladies and gents, this is the DCS Huey module, available on Steam or on the DCS website, depending on which version of DCS you use. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.